and welcome to Dragons Collective episode 2. This time around we have a bunch of creators talking about their best D&D or Pathfinder experiences and giving some tips on how you can sort of at least replicate some of that in your games. There's not just that, this is a variety show, so there's other things such as crafting and painting tips, but without further ado, let's roll some creator clips.
So today we're talking about our favorite D&D or role-playing game experiences. Well, this one was a hard one for me because I've been playing D&D for over 22 years and I've had so many great memories, made so many wonderful friendships. Ultimately, I decided to go with something a little bit more recent, which was my Descent into Avernus campaign, the finale to be specific. Over my years playing D&D and other RPGs and tabletop games, I've made a lot of friends, gotten a lot of people into tabletop games, and D&D especially. In fact, a coworker of mine, Stefano, who, if you watch my channel, you may recognize Stefano from a variety of my campaigns. He is one of those such players. I got him into the game. After indoctrinating Stefano, we thought it would be cool to get a bunch of our other teacher friends at school and get them to play in a work group. More and more teachers kind of wanted in, and we ended up with a total of 8 players overall, which is quite a lot. The real issue was that 6 of these 8 players were completely brand new to D&D, and some of them new to gaming in general. Naturally, we met in person. We started the campaign in October of 2019, and we were playing at my gaming club, Battle for Salvation. Now, in March, right when everything was shutting down here in the US, my wife and I actually welcomed our daughter, our second child, into the world. Because of this, our group had anticipated to take a few weeks off. A few weeks turned into a couple of months, and ultimately we had no real way of continuing this campaign in person. And I'm sure many of you were in a similar boat. It would have been very easy to just say screw it and just end the campaign here, but the players were so adamant and they were really excited about playing this game and they wanted to hang in there. I felt like I played with the Roll20 site nonstop for basically 2 weeks to try to figure it all out and be able to help others figure it out. Finally, it all came together and the sessions became more seamless. Everyone was back to playing and it felt normal, which was something we really all desperately needed at the time. So fast forward a few months to the summer of 2020, I had a great idea to start a YouTube channel. The channel began officially in August of 2020, and we had our finale to Descent into Avernus in the middle of September. So at the finale, I streamed the game with a total of 9 players. I had our original 8, and I had a friend, CJ, come on and run an NPC. We played for 7.5 hours. It was awesome, though. There was some real great character development. In fact, every character had a moment to shine. Some made huge sacrifices so that the party could achieve a very satisfying ending. Maybe it was all of these circumstances that led to getting to that finale, that maybe that made it more special. But either way, it felt like a major achievement, not just by me, but by all the players too. Oh, and to top it all off, the group being separated in some cases by thousands of miles as one of the players ended up moving away, they were still able to coordinate and send me a really cool present I'm going to show you now. They sent me some custom Avernus dice, and they wrote me a handwritten letter from their characters. Well, that about does it for this story. If you would like to see more of me and my ongoing live play campaigns, DM tips, and guide series, please check out my channel, Tabletop Bob. I know Olly is putting the description for all of the content creators down below. All right, everybody. I'll see you on the tabletop. Bye.
Hey folks, WallyDM here. This week I'm going to stick with the subject, which is best D&D experience. And to share mine, it's not just one experience. Don't get me wrong, my campaigns, I absolutely love them, whether I am the DM in the campaign or as a player. My one-shot adventures that I run with folks, absolutely love them. Both my campaigns, my one-shots, all of the games that I've played in and ran as a DM or GM, I have so many fond memories of all of them. But my best D&D experience is still ongoing. Now, it hasn't always been like this. I grew up in the 80s on Redbox D&D, and that was a time you really didn't tell a lot of folks that you played Dungeons & Dragons. You'd be made fun of or called a nerd, and that was... I bounced around a lot to a lot of different schools, so I was always the new kid, and I wasn't going to top that off by saying, oh yeah, I'm the new kid and I play Dungeons & Dragons, because in the 80s that probably would have got my head stuck in a toilet. But to see it nowadays, to see it so accepted, to see so many millions of people that play it, does my heart really good. And to be a part of it for the last 5 or 6 years as a dungeon master, as a player, and as a YouTube content creator is something that if I told my past self that this was a possibility in the future, I would have laughed. I would have laughed. There's no way I thought that it could have been like this. But now I've been to conventions. I've played games with folks from all over, for all around the world. I hardly get to play D&D in person anymore. The pandemic didn't help very much in 2020, but now I play online. I run games online. I play in games online. I play with folks that are my age. I play with folks that are older. I play with a lot of folks that are younger. And I play with players and DMs from all over the world. And probably my best experience, my favorite part about Dungeons and Dragons now is the reach. The fact that I can get on a game on Tuesday night and I have my friends from the United States and I have a player from Australia, that I can schedule a one-shot adventure, and I have someone from the United Kingdom, someone from Portugal, and someone from Florida. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. I've played with so many people from around the world, and to see the connectivity that this game has done, that it's brought all of these folks together, the fact that it's given me an outlet for my creativity, this is one of the best experiences of my life. I absolutely love Dungeons and Dragons, and I am proud to be a part of it, and I love seeing where it is going. I absolutely love it. So big shout out to Olly. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. And make sure you like and subscribe and check out all of the content creators here, because this is fantastic. I love collaborations and great to be part of it. Thanks for having me. On to the next.
I'm Trevor from Classes and Constructs, and I'm super stoked to talk about my best D&D experiences. I know that best should mean one, and I can't help it. I'm going to talk about more than one. I'm going to talk about two of my top D&D experiences. The first one is from my normal play group, and this was when I was more of a novice DM. We talk about this now. It's become an inside joke at our table, and it's called Rat Tracks. I even have a video published on my channel with an adventure, or a one-shot, inspired by this situation. I was a more novice DM at the time, and I was just trying to explain the world to my players. I was giving them site descriptions and the sounds they heard and what they smelled, and I said that they saw rat tracks going off the beaten path. This was supposed to be nothing. I didn't have anything planned for these rat tracks. It was just supposed to be like animal prints that they saw. But they always do what you don't expect, and my players followed the rat tracks. I had to, on the fly, come up with an entire dungeon and a rat lord who was summoning people into his lair. It was kind of overwhelming, but also hilarious, because I didn't have any of this planned. And my players probably knew, they were goading me into it, but it gave me a lot more confidence in being a DM, because I realized that one of my best sessions wasn't something that I meticulously crafted and world builded and planned for. It was something that I just let myself do. We just had fun. We just kind of let it happen. And my players really enjoyed it. And it's become an in-joke ever since. And now, I'm more careful about what I describe, first of all, but I'm also way more comfortable with more free-form DMing. The second thing that I want to talk about was a one-shot that I ran for 12 or 15 people, which is far too many. And that, I knew that going into it. I knew that trying to run this normally wasn't going to work. It was around Thanksgiving time, and the experience level was all over the place with this group. So what I decided to do was I made a Thanksgiving themed game. And all of the players were together having Thanksgiving dinner in a tavern, and essentially the game boiled down to one extended combat encounter, but they had to fight their Thanksgiving dinner. They fought I don't remember what actual stat block I used or what, but they fought a D&D turducken, and then they fought the furniture because the furniture was all mimics. It was a lot of fun to run this, and it gave the newer players some experience with the combat and the I don't know, just how silly D&D can be, and it wasn't too much, it wasn't too overwhelming trying to balance everyone's time in the spotlight, because obviously combat has an initiative order, so there was more clarity and focus as to what was going on. It ended up working out really well, and that game taught me a lot about running one-shots for newer players and for larger groups. Since that game, I've actually run one-shots for my in-laws, where we did a Christmas-themed game. I've run one-shots for students after school, where I asked them what they were interested in, what video games they've played or what movies they've watched, and I've tailored the experience to the play group. And you get that initial buy-in so much more quickly. You don't have that awkward moment of like, why are we all here? What are we doing? Why are we adventuring together? All of that is pushed to the side because your players are already bought into whatever's going on. So, Rat Tracks and D&D Thanksgiving are my two best D&D experiences. For DM tips, homebrew advice, or more D&D content, check out Classes and Constructs on YouTube or Twitter.
My best D&D experience. My best D&D experience, other than starting the Drunken Kobold, would have to be D&D Live in 2020. I've never been able to be a convention person. The closest I've ever been was the Grand Prix Pro Tour circuit in Magic the Gathering. So being able to attend a digital convention for Dungeons & Dragons was an amazing experience. For those who didn't get to play in D&D Live, we played a one-shot called Ice Road Trackers. It was divided into 4 one-hour sections, and each section you most likely played with an entirely new group of people from the session before, including a new Dungeon Master. So going into each session, you were most likely playing with a new group of people who had a completely different experience of the session before than you did. By the end of the weekend, you played with between 16 and 20 different people, including the Dungeon Master, and most, well, in my case, all of them were complete strangers. This was a weekend of a lot of firsts for me. My biggest first was it was the first time for me playing on that side of the Dungeon Master screen, metaphorically speaking, for organized play. I've DM'd 5e since day one, while it was still referred to as Expeditions and Encounters coming off 4e. So being able to be a player in organized play was a very different experience. Second, it opened me to the idea of virtual tabletops. I've always been an in-person at the actual table player, and being opened up to VTTs like Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds was a very surreal experience for me, and since then I've been slowly learning how to use Fantasy Grounds so that I can run my own games on the platform. So yeah, no, D&D Live was definitely my best Dungeons & Dragons experience of all these years, and I look forward to doing it again this coming July, and I do hope to see some of you there. In the meantime, cheers, and may the rolls be with you.
I've got 2 quick stories here for you for my best experiences. The first one is when we completely threw the DM. Basically, we were a very low-level adventuring party, and we were going through what can best be described as almost like a tutorial, a warm-up adventure, to sort of group all the characters together. Now we came up against some animated armour. Now one of the players quickly thought and looked around the room to ask about what there was that we might be able to use to our advantage. Now the DM sort of listed off some things, some bookcases, barrels and such, and that's when the player had an idea. They actually picked the barrel up, put it over the top of the animated armour, and the animated armour couldn't roll high enough to break through and break from sort of the iron casked barrel. It was a hilarious sort of event that everyone around the table really enjoyed, and it was just something that no one could have planned for. And I think that's a great thing when you can just roll with things on the fly. You get these great moments. Another one is an example when a bad roll can create something either funny or, again, just roll with something else. I was playing a wizard with Misty Step. I'd used that to short-range teleport onto the back of the dragon we were fighting. I used Burning Hands through effectively the back of its face, and that was pretty much it dead. The problem was I was still on top. So what I needed to do was an acrobatics check to try and do a stylish backflip off the dragon. Now, of course, that didn't go as planned, and I sort of splatted, thankfully, into a large puddle next to some sort of spikes and some floor. It was a great experience where, it would have been awesome if I'd done this mega backflip off the top of the dragon. But it didn't pan out, and it was kind of, everyone had a bit of a chuckle at, let's be honest, my pretty poor dice rolls. Anyway, let's roll some more creator clips, and this time I think No Fun Allowed is going to be a little controversial, so let's start with that one.
Some of the best RPG experiences I've ever had in D&D comes from killing player characters. Now, before you start raising up the pitchforks and torches against me, let me go ahead and defend myself here. So, in today's day and age, we typically frown upon killing player characters. That is definitely something that's of the old school mentality. In 5e, in newer games, we typically don't want to kill our player characters left, right, and center. But here's the thing. I personally know that all of my players in this vast, huge group of people that I DM for, they know that my games are deathly. And they are rewarded with their lives. And the thing is I ran this big old West Marches style game that had 30 people in it, over 30 people in it. And it was amazing because I had a full TPK in the third session of that West Marches game, and everyone saw it. Everyone saw that so many PCs died, and one PC actually got captured by the bad guys. And it was awesome because instead of them throwing vitriol and hate my way, instead of them saying that you're evil or, oh, it's your fault, you're not playing fair, your DMing's terrible, I did not get any of that. You know what I got? I got a bunch of players who, instead of pointing at me, pointed to themselves and to each other. And that was a very healthy mentality. Instead of them pouring their hatred into me, they instead reflected on their own mistakes, and that made them better in the long run. Of course, over time, more and more PCs died, but they always learned from it, and they never pointed their fingers at me. I think that was a very awesome experience in RPGdom. It wasn't a DM versus player mentality, but there was still PC death involved. That was totally awesome.
What is up? My name is Melissa McCack, and in this episode, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite, if not my favorite experience, playing Dungeons and Dragons. And specifically, this happened during 4th edition, the infamous 4th edition. But that's the one that we started out with when playing and getting into D&D. So that's what I'll be talking about. And now, it was usually just myself, my brother, and my sister playing D&D together. It was just us three. But we thought, or mostly I thought, it would be really cool if we got some parents involved, right? So I knew that we were going up to Pennsylvania. We have a little house in Pennsylvania, just for fun and everything. We're from New York, we're from Brooklyn, and we were going up with my mom, and then her best friend since like, they were 8 years old. Okay, so they're super close, so I call her aunt, all right? And then her son, who's pretty much family to us as well, and one of my best friends. So, we were going up to Pennsylvania all together, and I was like, let's all play Dungeons and Dragons together. And the two moms were sort of like hesitant, but they're like, okay, to try to like please me, I guess, which doesn't usually happen. They don't usually do these things for me, but they did it this time, so that was cool. Anyway, so we're in the cabin in the woods, and it's nighttime, it's dark. It was like the perfect aura for, or atmosphere for playing Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, what I did was I replicated, if anybody's watched the episode of Chris Perkins, or the series of Chris Perkins playing with the creators of Chicken Robot, or Robot Chicken. We gave them out each of their characters who we thought they would, like to play the most, or we might have given them a choice as like, would you like to play the wizard or the knight or whatever. And it was just a blast. They were confused for the most part, but like they finally got to like the last room in the dungeon, and things were going crazy. They were dying left and right. So like my mom had fallen unconscious at one point, and my friend was like, nope, I'm booking it, I'm out. And she's like, what? You're not gonna save me? You have to understand, she's like Brooklyn, Italian, small person, big personality. And the person I call Aunt, she was just like totally confused. She's like, I don't know what to do. I'm about to go unconscious too. And everybody was just freaking out. And it was hilarious. And I just had so much fun. It looked like they were having a lot of fun. And that is probably my favorite experience. So thank you so much. If you like, you could check out mine and my brother's own channel called Room 51. We're on YouTube and Twitch. I'll catch you next time.
Hello, Treantmonk here. I was asked to share my best D&D experience. And that had me really thinking, as that's kind of difficult to narrow down, as I've had so many great experiences with this game. So today I'm going to share a good D&D experience that I learned something from. I had a halfling character named Lucky, and the concept of the character was that this halfling was exceptionally lucky, and they were a good luck charm rather than actually skilled. Spell effects and character features thematically seemed like my character was a normal halfling, except that luck was constantly intervening on his behalf as well as those of his friends. The great experience I want to share is how the DM worked with the concept. When the mechanics mattered, we would naturally use the mechanics of the game to represent luck. So if we were in combat and I benefited from a bless spell, it would somehow appear like fate intervened on my behalf, like tripping over my own feet and stumbling out of a spell's line of fire might explain how the saving throw became a success. When the mechanics of the game weren't involved, though, the DM began to still involve the concept. So we'd be at a tavern, and the server would accidentally bring a large meal that wasn't intended for our table by mistake, or those kinds of things that are just narrative reinforcements of the character concept. This ended up being a lot of fun for our group, and we leaned into the idea that if Lucky couldn't be good, then at least he could be lucky. This is one of those cases where an experience as a player has taught me something about being a DM. When your players have invested thought into a concept, and we really understand that concept, as a DM we can have fun with it as well. We can reinforce an idea of who that character is, rather than the writing on the character sheet, to enhance our own campaign world. DMs recognizing these concepts, and then reinforcing them with story elements, is a reward to your players that can be more rewarding than a magical item or other mechanical advantage, because it allows us to immerse more effectively into our character, which is something that, at least personally, always ensures I remember the session I just played with fondness. That might seem strange coming from someone who specializes in character optimization and analyzing the mechanics of the game, but I think it's also a reminder that when it comes to what we get out of this great game, there's no reason why it has to be just one thing. We can optimize and still love the role-playing experience. We can dig into personality, voices, and interaction, and still love that big moment where we defeat the powerful enemy. We can delve into puzzles and note-taking, and still love the moment where our DM describes the spookiness of the castle we see in the distance. So that is an experience that I remember fondly, and I thought I would share it with you. If you want to check out my channel, come see me at Treantmonk's Temple.
Hello, and welcome to this video where a disembodied voice is going to talk to you about how to use some simple, fast miniature painting techniques to make pre-painted D&D miniatures, like this happy little reindeer, look a little bit better quite quickly. What we're going to be looking at today is the process of doing an oil wash. In this case, I'm going to be using Shadow Brown by Abteilung 502, but you could use practically anything. Black from Rembrandt, Burnt Umber from Old Holland, even a Violet from Winsor & Newton. The main thing to make sure of that it's an artist grade oil paint, which means that it has finely ground pigment. The other thing you'll need, white spirit. Many places to get this from. Again, make sure it's artist stuff. The hardware store white spirit's pretty unpleasant. Other things you need, something to put the wash in. I'm using one of these, but it's easy to clean. A sponge. In this case, I'm using an eyeshadow applicator. And of course, brush. And in my case, a pipette to move the white spirit around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little bit of oil paint, dollop it in there. Then I'm going to get a few drops of white spirit, mix it together. See what I'm looking for here, testing it on the side, is thick, milky consistency. It's about right. Okay, with the oil wash made, it's now time to apply it to the model, which is just going to be a case of daubing it all over the place. Instantly you can see capillary action, it's running into all the gaps. Okay, with that done, it's now time to leave them to dry. About 15 minutes. Now it's time to wipe off some of that oil paint. Obviously, this has darkened him down quite a lot. We don't want it to be that extreme. So I'm just going to take my sponge, give it a wipe, focusing on the upper areas. Okay, that's about as far as I can take that with just the sponge. So now I'm going to do a few little bits with the brush. Getting some white spirit on there and then soaking almost all of it off to clean up little areas of detail like the hooves. By doing this, you can pretty much remove the oil paint entirely if you want to bring back the original colour, just leaving it in the recesses. Thanks for watching. I hope you can agree that the end result has much more contrast and obvious detail compared to the original. In future episodes, I will be taking some further steps to improve the end result further. In lieu of any further video content from me as yet, I would direct you towards the excellent tutorial videos from Vince Venturella, linked below.
So what can you expect from Don't Be Bored over the next couple of weeks? Well, D&D related, I'm probably going to be unboxing this full nice metal D&D dice set from Ultra Pro. So you'll see a video on that. You know, it's spinning round and all that sort of cool jazz. But otherwise, let's get on with some news. The first bit of news is, well, if you are a Pathfinder fan, or if you're maybe looking to get into Pathfinder, why don't you head over to the Humble Bundle? If you don't know about the Humble Bundle, basically it's a website, normally for video games, but also RPG books and software and stuff. You pledge a certain amount towards a charity. Paizo, in this case, will probably get a cut. A charity will get a cut, and you get a load of mostly digital Pathfinder books. If you go for the top tier, 25 rough pounds, that's about $35, then you get 40 included items, and actually one of them is a physical book, with the rest being digital. Next up is a news story that we're basically going to skim over, that there is a D&D version of Monopoly coming out. Now, let's move on before anyone thinks it's a good idea to buy that. A range of images have been released for the upcoming Orc Warband set. So this is the pre-painted set of 5 or 6 orcs, I think it is, from WizKids. If I got the number wrong, I'll put it on the screen here. And effectively, it's a bunch of kind of blue-skinned orcs. They're all pre-painted with clear bases and such. It's not one of their blind boxes, so you know exactly what you're going to get. I've just reviewed the Goblin Warband. I was pretty happy with that one, so I'll probably be looking to get this Orc one too. Anyway, that's enough news. Let's roll some more creator clips.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to Bilbrons Dragons. I'm your host, Bilbron Bafflestone. So today we're having another episode of my storytelling series, where I've got 3 minutes to tell you about my very best Dungeons & Dragons experience ever. So my thoughts immediately go to Scourge the Undying, my favorite character ever. A couple of pics that I drew of him 25 years ago because I loved him so much. And he was a fighter, defiler, psionicist in the infamous Dark Sun setting. This was a setting that was intended to be the most overpowered setting that D&D has ever released, and it really fit the bill. The idea was that it was so deadly that the characters had to be super powerful just to survive, because that little kid begging on the corner could disintegrate you. Everyone had wild talents, and you could play crazy races, and there were crazy psionics, amongst which the powers were subjective reality, where I could create a reality to live in where wizard magic didn't exist. So that 20th level archmage, just a dude to me, and I have psionics, so not going to work out too good. So an overpowered campaign setting, and I am a super good optimizer. That's what Bilbrons and Dragons is all about, creating elite and powerful character builds, doing deep dives into spells and abilities. I do metagaming and tell these stories and such, so that's what we do. And we, I'm really good at it. And so you put me in a setting like that, oh my God, it was crazy. We were so powerful, and we were having epic battles all the time, so that was fun. But what really made it memorable was that my dungeon master, in response to my power level, created an NPC assassin called Ghost, who plagued me and became my nemesis. And it was personal between us. He told our party, I don't care about you guys, I'm just here for this guy's head. And, we were all evil, so they were all like, all right, great, let's get some popcorn. And he understood the weakness of a character like Scourge, who, yes, was more or less invincible in any sort of direct confrontation, but all of his powers depended on resources, specifically spell slots and psionic strength points. So when I'm low on those, not nearly as powerful. And so I couldn't detect this guy, could never find this guy. He could always just show up whenever he wanted, drove me crazy, and he would show up when I was low and weak and make his play. And we had lots of epic confrontations where I would just barely turn him back. And then finally he launched a campaign where he just literally never let me rest. I could never recover any spells or psionics, and I became super stingy, and this played out over the course of a few sessions. It was super tense and dramatic, and ultimately, he got me. The invincible Scourge had died. It was a stunning moment for everyone at the table. We talked about it for years to come. Really, really amazing campaign. And the cool thing is that in my last campaign featuring Bilbrons Bafflestone, I had a very similar experience featuring a nemesis, and I talk about this on my channel. It's part of the storytelling series, so feel free to check it out if you want to hear the next chapter, so to speak, in my experiences with Nemesis. Regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been Bilbrons and Dragons. I'm your host, Bilbrons Bafflestone. See you next time.
Hi folks, this is Andy from Potable Gaming, and I'm here to talk about best RPG experiences. Now, there are tons of individual actions and events I could talk about, but I want to talk about a longer form experience, and when a friend of mine took his first attempt at DMing. So he downloaded us a adventure path for levels 1 to 3, and found it to be quite lacking in terms of depth. A lot of it was just very simple. Here, you go here, you fight these dudes, like that's it. And he wanted to add more character to it, including the constable, who was the key person giving us quests, who was primarily just called the constable. He added him a name, he added him a family, he added him a connection to the town and his suspicions, and he really played him well. And he became a key cornerstone of this adventure. We kept going away, doing the tasks, coming back, discussing it, breaking down theories, trying to understand what was going on. The key issue being a cult that ran the town that we believed was ran by the nobleman who employed most of the town. This led to us finally going through to one of the mines owned by the nobleman, where we battled through to the cult leader. We were about to get killed by one of the cult high priests until Horberg, who'd been shadowing us all the way down and doing additional investigations, dived in and saved us. Because if he hadn't, we were going to die. And this was amazing. This forged a stronger bond. We knew now all the nobles who were involved. We knew what we had to do. Our party went and took on one of the bigger nobles, while Horberg went on to confront another. We went in, our mission was a success. We then went off to try and support Horberg and see how he went and see if he needed any help. We arrived to the stately home of the Dornan family and found a bloodbath. The nobleman was killed, his guards killed, and in the corner, watched over by a crying child, Horberg had been killed. We asked her what had happened, and she told us. Horberg had came in and confronted the nobleman. He grabbed the girl and slit her throat to try and distract Horberg. Horberg fought his way across, killed his assailants, suffered a fatal wound in the process, and with his dying breath cast a healing spell to save the little girl who was bleeding out. We were devastated. Our DM tells me he was holding back tears because he was devastated. He was so heartbroken to let this character go, but he was ready to. But we weren't. I mentioned earlier we had ill-gotten gains. We had enough money to set up the murder hobos in the style to which they'd love to be accustomed. And we loaded that all into a truck with Horberg, and we went to the nearest city and we brought him back to life, because this character had meant so much to us, had been such an integral part of it. In the book was meant to be, he tells you to go here. It took a few weeks of actual sessions to get to the city and back. The town now has its constable back. We are in the town, cleaning up the mess we made, and almost certainly going to spend more time there. We haven't been able to play the adventure for a while, but I cannot wait to see where it goes, because we've forged true character relations with this, and it's been a wonderful experience. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Did you enjoy this experience? What experiences have you enjoyed from everybody else's segments? Folks, I've been Andy, and it's your round.
GameMasters here, and every role player wants to have fun. Every dungeon master wants to have fun. Every game master wants to have fun. Here are 3 tips to ensure that everyone has the best role-playing game experience. Tip 1. Develop a player character's backstory. Allow and encourage the players to develop a backstory to their character. This allows them to become attached to something more than just a sheet of paper with numbers scribbled all over it. Encourage two players to develop how their characters know each other. This will create a bond between those characters and provides a rich and dynamic element. Then, the crafty DM can exploit those backgrounds and incorporate those elements into their overall meta storyline. This is what provides an excellent role-playing game experience. A player knowing that their character has an overall impact on how the story unfolds, that's just fun for everyone. Tip 2. Don't get bogged down with the rules. I'm not saying don't have rules, they are important, but what I'm saying is don't get locked into a 20-minute debate over a rule that really has little impact to what is going on. Some situations may warrant that debate, but most don't, and just detract from overall gameplay, and many people just walk away frustrated. Step 3. Imagination. Use your imagination for everything. Inspiration can come from almost anywhere. I went to the grocery store trying to find, actually I went to 3 grocery stores trying to find some pork noodles for my son, and each one was sold out. Seriously, how can 3 grocery stores be completely sold out of pork noodles? Anyway, I encountered one worker who offered to actually text me when they got more in, and I encountered another that was kind of offended that I was even asked for any. I asked them if they had any in the back, and she was just very offended that I even asked that. And on my way back out to my car, I found a dime in the parking lot. So how could I use that? Well, I turned that all into a one-shot session. A merchant has a missing pig and suspects one of 3 farmers stole it. Please hurry before it's turned into bacon. The first farmer is very helpful and provides the adventurers with everything they may need in terms of information and food. The second farmer wasn't so nice and swiftly turns the party away. The third farmer, however, had been slain, and on the threshold of his estate was a shiny piece of silver with a spot of blood on it. Imagination is probably the best key to having a great role-playing game experience. Now, more details on those topics can be found on my website, GameMasters.com, and on my YouTube at youtube.com/GameMastersHere. Thanks for having me on.
Hi everyone, I'm Clara, and I love running Dungeons and Dragons games, but I love running them in person. I love building sets and having all the enemies there. You can't always get all of the enemies, and so I'm going to show you a hack for some. And today's enemy is going to be inspired by the coming out of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. One of my favourite kind of enemies, which you see a few times, are the flying swords. But also, while I'm at it, I'm going to show you how to make spiritual weapons as well, using the same sort of technique. So I have a whole bunch of spare parts from Warhammer, and I'm sure I'm not alone, and there's a whole bunch of weapons in there. Some of the swords, they are being held by hand, so I just chopped that off, and it makes the hilt look a bit bad, but don't worry about that, we'll deal with that. Then I'm just going to put a quick hole in the side, and to that I'm going to put some wire and glue that in. Then I'm going to glue some cotton onto where the hilt of the sword is and just wrap it round. And then finish off by gluing it on the end, and it actually looked pretty good actually, and it covers up the mess where we cut the hand off. Then I've got one older flying sword that I'm going to have, so I put some Typhus Corrosion from Citadel on it before I did the base paint, and then with all of them I painted them primer of white to make the silvers really pop. Then for the flying swords I painted the blades lead belcher, and then I highlighted it with lighter silvers, but I've not filmed that here. And then I also painted the hilts various browns and again highlighted them. With the spiritual weapons, I actually painted them chrome from Vallejo, which is a really light silver looking colour, and then covered them over with Mystic White from Green Stuff World. And then I used a sponge to dabble on some candy inks just to give them these sort of mystical swirls. Then I went on and put some Agrat Thurshade in the hilts and on the older sword, and I used some Nuln Oil on the other flying sword and also in the details of the spiritual weapons. I didn't want to cover the whole spiritual weapon, so it's just the details. Once I've done that, I wanted to make some bases, so I have some thin XPS foam. You can use clay as well, and I have this roller from Green Stuff Wool, but you don't need that. I'm going to show you a different way, but with these rollers, you just roll them over the foam and it gives this really great indent. It's brilliant. But if you don't have one of these, which is very reasonable, do some shallow indents with a knife and then use something blunt like a pencil or something to go round those indents. So after that, I paint them with Mod Podge. It makes them harder and a bit more sturdy, and then I painted them up. Then the fun stuff, so I've got a glue gun and I just made some wispy glue off the wire of the things, and I tried to make it a bit more 3D, and that was me. That was how I did it. It maybe doesn't look the best, but I think it looks pretty good, so pretty pleased with that. So yeah, it'd be lovely if you came over and watched me do more painting and diorama videos on my channel. I'd love to see you there, and until next time, take care and bye bye.
Anyway, that about wraps it up today, so thank you very much for watching. Thanks to all the creators for getting involved today. Make sure you like and subscribe here, but also go and check out all of their channels. You know, there's a lot of content that they all put out. Absolutely brilliant stuff, so go and check that out. Links will be in the description box below. And until next time, in a fortnight's time with episode 3, well, let's hope your rolls are higher than mine. Catch you later. Bye.